The leather satchel slammed against her ribs with every desperate stride, each impact a reminder of the message inside that could save or damn an entire settlement. And Jenny Bryant knew that if she stopped running now, the blood of innocence would stain her hands forever. The Wyoming Territory stretched endlessly before her, the rugged terrain of the mountain passes testing every ounce of strength she possessed. It was August 1876, and the midday sun beat down mercilessly on the rocky trail between Victor and the neighboring mining camps. Her lungs burned like forge bellows, each breath a ragged gasp that tore through her chest. The buckskin boots her father had made for her before his death were holding up, but her legs trembled with exhaustion. She had been running for nearly 6 hours straight, pausing only to gulp water from mountain streams when the opportunity presented itself. Jenny was 22 years old and had been working as a messenger for the past 3 years, ever since her father passed and left her alone in the world. Women in her profession were rare, but she had proven herself capable time and again. Her reputation for reliability had grown throughout the territory. She delivered messages, documents, and small parcels between settlements where the regular mail carriers refused to go or where speed was of the essence. Today's message was the most important she had ever carried. The warning clutched against her chest told of a planned raid on Victor by a gang of outlaws who had been terrorizing settlements across Wyoming for months. A sympathetic bartender in a rough camp 30 miles north had overheard their plans and paid her handsomely to run the message to the sheriff in Victor before nightfall. The outlaws planned to strike at dawn tomorrow, and without warning, the small town would be unprepared for the violence heading their way. Her vision began to blur at the edges. The trail ahead seemed to waver and dance like heat shimmer on summer stones. She pushed harder, forcing her legs to keep moving even as they threatened to give out beneath her. The mountains rose on either side of the narrow pass, their peaks still crowned with patches of snow despite the summer heat. Pine trees dotted the slopes, their scent sharp and clean in the thin air. Jenny stumbled over a root but caught herself, barely maintaining her balance. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She could not fail, would not fail. The people of Victor depended on her, even if they did not know it yet. Sheriff Morrison needed this information to organize a defense, to call in help from neighboring settlements, to prepare the townspeople for what was coming. The path ahead grew steeper as it wound around a massive boulder formation. Her pace slowed despite her best efforts. The muscles in her thighs burned with accumulated lactic acid, and her calves felt like they were filled with ground glass. Still, she pushed on, one foot in front of the other, refusing to acknowledge the way her body screamed for rest. She thought of her father, of the lessons he had taught her about determination and duty. William Bryant had been a scout and guide before an accident left him unable to make the long treks through the mountains. He had passed his knowledge to her, teaching her to read trails, to navigate by the stars, to survive in the wilderness. When he died, she had taken everything he taught her and forged a new life as a messenger. He would be proud of her dedication, she told herself. He would want her to finish this run. The trail crested a ridge, and for a moment she could see Victor in the valley below, still miles away. The small town was nothing more than a collection of wooden buildings along a single main street, but it was home to nearly 200 people. Good people. Families, children. They deserved a chance to defend themselves. Jenny started down the far side of the ridge, gravity adding speed to her descent. Too much speed. Her exhausted legs could not keep up with the momentum, and she felt herself pitching forward. She tried to catch herself, but her body would not respond properly. The world tilted crazily, and then she was falling, tumbling down the rocky slope in a confusion of pain and dust. She came to rest in a heap at the bottom of the incline, the breath knocked from her lungs. For several long seconds, she could not move, could not think, could only lie there gasping like a landed fish. When her vision cleared, she tried to push herself up, but her arms would not support her weight. Her legs felt like water, boneless and useless. No, not now, not when she was so close. Jenny forced herself to her hands and knees, then tried to stand. She made it halfway up before her legs buckled and she collapsed again. Tears of frustration burned in her eyes. She had to keep going, had to deliver the message. Lives depended on her. She crawled forward, her hands scraping against rough stone and dirt. Every movement was agony, but she refused to stop. The satchel remained secure across her body, the message safe inside. As long as she protected that, there was still hope. The sound of heavy footsteps reached her through the fog of pain and exhaustion. Jenny's hand went instinctively to the small knife at her belt. Though she doubted, she had the strength to wield it effectively. She looked up through the tangle of her brown hair that had come loose from its braid, squinting against the glare of the afternoon sun. A man stood silhouetted against the bright sky, tall and broad-shouldered in a way that spoke of immense physical strength. As he moved closer, stepping out of the direct sunlight, she could make out more details. He was perhaps 27 or 28 years old, with long dark hair that fell past his shoulders and a thick beard that framed a weathered, handsome face. He wore buckskin clothing similar to her own, practical garments suited for mountain life, and carried a rifle slung across his back. His arms were bare from the elbows down, revealing powerful forearms corded with muscle. "Easy there," he said, his voice a deep rumble that somehow managed to be both commanding and gentle. He knelt beside her and she could see concern in his dark eyes. "You are hurt." "Victor," Jenny gasped out, her voice barely a whisper. "Have to get to Victor. Message. Important." The man's eyes went to the leather satchel she clutched protectively against her chest, then back to her face. He seemed to understand immediately that this was no ordinary situation. "How far have you run?" he asked. "From Carson Camp." 6 hours, maybe more." The words came out broken, separated by desperate gasps for air. "Raiders, coming at dawn, have to warn the town." The man's expression grew grim. He glanced toward the distant town, then back at her. Without another word, he carefully lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. Jenny wanted to protest, to insist she could make it on her own, but her body betrayed her. She had nothing left to give. "My name is Zachary Kane," he told her as he began walking with long, purposeful strides down the trail toward Victor. His pace was faster than she could have managed even when fresh, and he showed no sign of strain despite carrying her full weight. "I have a cabin about 3 miles from town. Been living in these mountains for 5 years now." "Jenny Bryant," she managed to reply. "Messenger." "The sheriff needs to know. They are coming with at least 20 men, maybe more." "Then the sheriff will know," Zachary assured her. His arms were like iron bands around her, solid and secure. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the easy rhythm of his breathing. Whatever his life in the mountains entailed, he was clearly in peak physical condition. "Rest now. Save your strength." Despite her determination to remain alert, Jenny felt her eyes growing heavy. The rhythmic motion of his walking, combined with her utter exhaustion, pulled her toward unconsciousness. She fought it for a while, but eventually she surrendered to the darkness. When she woke, the quality of light had changed. The sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. She was still in Zachary's arms, and he was still walking with that same steady, tireless pace. They had descended from the mountain pass and were now on more level ground, following a well-worn trail through a meadow of tall grass. "How long was I asleep?" Jenny asked, her voice hoarse. "About an hour," Zachary replied. He glanced down at her, and she saw relief flicker across his face. "You needed it. When I found you, you were more dead than alive." "I had to keep going," she said. "The message." "I understand duty," Zachary told her, "but you would have done no one any good if you had run yourself into the grave. Sometimes accepting help is not weakness but wisdom." Jenny considered his words. Pride had always been one of her failings, her father used to say. She preferred to handle things on her own to prove she needed no one. But Zachary was right. If she had continued in her condition, she likely would have collapsed completely and the message never would have reached Victor. By accepting his help now, she was actually ensuring her mission succeeded. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me." "No thanks needed," Zachary replied. "Anyone with a decent heart would have done the same." "Not everyone," Jenny countered. "I have seen enough of this territory to know that kindness is not as common as it should be." They fell into companionable silence after that. Jenny studied Zachary's profile as he walked, noting the strong line of his jaw beneath the beard, the way his eyes constantly scanned the surrounding terrain with practiced vigilance. He moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness, someone who knew every rock and tree of these mountains. "You said you have lived up here for 5 years," Jenny said after a while. "What brought you to the mountains?" Zachary was quiet for a moment, and she wondered if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than evasive. "I fought in the war," he said. "For the Union, saw things that changed me. After it ended, I could not go back to regular life, to towns and crowds and the noise of civilization. I needed space, silence. The mountains offered both." Jenny understood. Many men had returned from the war broken in ways both visible and invisible. Some drowned their pain in whiskey. Some turned mean and violent, and some, like Zachary, sought solitude and peace in the wilderness. "You regret it?" she asked. "The isolation?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "I go into Victor every few weeks for supplies, and occasionally I guide hunting parties or help with search and rescue operations. But mostly I trap and hunt and live alone. It suits me, or at least it has suited me until now." There was something in the way he said those last words that made Jenny's heart skip a beat. She told herself it was just residual exhaustion affecting her, but she could not quite convince herself. Something in the way Zachary held her, in the care with which he carried her, spoke of more than simple Good Samaritan charity. The outskirts of Victor came into view as they rounded a bend in the trail. The town was nestled in a valley where 2 streams converged, providing reliable water and fertile soil for gardens. Most of the buildings were constructed of rough-hewn logs, though a few of the newer structures boasted milled lumber hauled in from distant sawmills. The main street ran north to south, lined with the usual assortment of establishments: a general store, a saloon, a church, a small hotel, and various other businesses. "The sheriff's office is on the east side of the main street," Jenny directed. "Second building past the saloon." Zachary nodded and adjusted his course accordingly. As they entered the town proper, people stopped to stare. Jenny could imagine what they saw: the mountain man they occasionally glimpsed at the trading post, carrying a dust-covered woman in his arms like she was precious cargo. She felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with exertion or the summer sun. The sheriff's office was a squat log building with bars on the single window. Zachary pushed through the door without bothering to knock. Inside, a weathered man in his 50s looked up from his desk with an expression of surprise that quickly shifted to concern. "What happened?" Sheriff Morrison asked, rising from his chair. "This is Jenny Bryant," Zachary said, gently setting her down in a chair against the wall. Her legs still felt weak, but she could sit upright at least. "She has run from Carson Camp with an urgent message." Jenny fumbled with the satchel strap, her hands shaking from fatigue. Zachary helped her, his large fingers surprisingly deft as he worked the buckle free. She pulled out the sealed letter and handed it to the sheriff. Morrison broke the seal and read quickly, his face growing more troubled with each line. When he finished, he looked up at Jenny with a mixture of gratitude and worry. "This is reliable information?" he asked. "Thomas Cooper sent it," Jenny replied. Thomas was the bartender who had overheard the outlaw's plans. "He has no reason to lie and every reason to want that gang stopped. They killed his brother in a raid last month." The sheriff nodded grimly. 20 men, you said, coming at dawn." "At least 20. Maybe more. They are planning to hit the bank and the trading post, and they do not care who gets in their way." Morrison turned to his deputy, a young man named Sam who had been listening from his position near the stove. "Ride to the Johnson Ranch and the Miller homestead. Tell them we need every able-bodied man who can shoot. Then head to Pine Creek and see if their sheriff can spare a few men. We have maybe 15 hours to prepare." The deputy grabbed his hat and rushed out. Morrison turned back to Jenny. "You did good work getting this here, Miss Bryant. Likely saved lives today." "Zachary saved me," Jenny corrected. "I collapsed on the trail. He carried me the rest of the way." The sheriff's gaze shifted to Zachary, assessing. "That is twice you have helped this town, Kane. Once during the flood last spring and now this." "Just doing what is right," Zachary replied simply. Morrison studied them both for another moment, then said, "Miss Bryant, you look like you are about to fall over. The hotel is just up the street. I will have someone take you there so you can rest properly." "I can walk her," Zachary offered before Jenny could protest. "Want to make sure she gets there safely." Jenny wanted to insist she was fine, but the truth was that even sitting still required significant effort. She nodded gratefully, and Zachary helped her to her feet, keeping one supportive arm around her waist as they left the sheriff's office. The hotel was a modest 2-story structure with a painted sign that read Mountain View Lodge. The proprietor, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson, took one look at Jenny's condition and immediately began fussing over her. "Poor dear, you look absolutely exhausted," she said, guiding Jenny toward the stairs. "Zachary, help me get her up to room 4. It is the nicest one we have available." Between them, they got Jenny up the stairs and into a small but clean room with a real bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Mrs. Henderson bustled about, pouring water into the basin and pulling back the covers on the bed. "I will have some food sent up," she said. "What you need now is rest and nourishment." "I should help with the preparations," Jenny protested weakly. "The defense of the town. You have done your part," Zachary told her firmly. He had positioned himself near the door as though standing guard. "Let the sheriff and his men handle the rest. You need to recover." Jenny wanted to argue, but she could barely keep her eyes open. Mrs. Henderson helped her remove her boots and outer clothing, and as soon as Jenny's head touched the pillow, she felt consciousness slipping away again. She woke several times during the night, briefly aware of sounds from outside. Horses arriving, men's voices discussing strategy, the clatter of weapons being prepared. Each time, she would drift back to sleep within moments. Her body demanded rest, and there was nothing she could do but surrender to it. Dawn light was filtering through the window when she finally woke properly. Jenny sat up slowly, assessing her condition. She was sore all over, her muscles stiff and protesting, but the bone-deep exhaustion had receded. She could function again. The sound of gunfire from somewhere in town brought her fully alert. The raid. It had started. Jenny stumbled to the window and looked out. From her vantage point, she could see part of the main street. Men were positioned behind cover, rifles at the ready. As she watched, a group of riders thundered into view from the north end of town, firing wildly. The defenders returned fire with disciplined volleys, and two of the raiders fell from their horses immediately. The battle was fierce but brief. The outlaws had expected an easy target and found instead an armed and prepared defense. Within 20 minutes, it was over. Some of the raiders lay dead in the street. Others had been wounded and captured. The rest had fled back the way they came, and Jenny could see a group of riders pursuing them. She dressed quickly, ignoring her protesting muscles, and made her way downstairs. The hotel lobby was crowded with townspeople seeking news and tending to minor injuries. She pushed through to the street, searching for familiar faces. Sheriff Morrison stood outside his office directing the cleanup efforts. When he saw Jenny, he broke into a tired smile. "Miss Bryant," he said, "glad to see you up and about. We held them off, thanks to your warning. Lost only one man, old Pete Miller, and he went down fighting. Could have been so much worse if they had caught us unprepared." "I am glad I could help," Jenny replied. "What happens now? We have prisoners to deal with, and we will send word to the territorial marshal about the ones that got away," Morrison explained. "But the immediate danger is past. The town is safe." Jenny felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had succeeded. The message had reached Victor in time, and lives had been saved. It was what she had been willing to die for, and knowing it had worked made every painful step of that desperate run worthwhile. "Have you seen Zachary Kane?" she asked, trying to sound casual. The sheriff pointed down the street. "Last I saw, he was helping board up the window at the trading post. Took a stray bullet during the fight." Jenny's heart lurched. "He was in the fight. Is he hurt?" "Kane, no, he is fine. Man handles a rifle like he was born with one. Took down 3 raiders himself from a position on the hotel roof." Jenny started toward the trading post, her pace quickening despite her sore legs. She found Zachary working with the post's owner to nail planks across a shattered window. He had removed his shirt in the growing morning heat, and she could not help but notice the powerful muscles of his back and shoulders, the way they flexed and moved under sun-bronzed skin. "Zachary," she called. He turned, and his serious expression softened when he saw her. "Jenny, you should still be resting." "I have rested enough," she replied, joining him by the window. "Sheriff Morrison told me you fought in the battle. Could not stand by and let innocent people get hurt," Zachary said. He handed the hammer to the trading post owner and picked up his shirt, shrugging it back on. "Besides, I have some experience with this sort of thing." "Thank you," Jenny said, "for everything. For saving me yesterday, for helping defend the town. You did not have to do any of it." Zachary looked at her for a long moment, and Jenny felt something pass between them, an unspoken connection that made her breath catch. "Yes, I did," he said quietly. "The moment I saw you collapsed on that trail, I knew I would do whatever it took to help you. And when I learned what you had risked to bring that warning, I knew I had to stand with this town." They stood there in the morning sunlight, the sounds of the town recovering around them, and Jenny felt something shift inside her chest. She had always been independent, self-reliant, content with her solitary life. But looking at Zachary now, she recognized something she had never expected to feel. A longing for connection, for partnership, for someone to share her life with. "Will you stay in town for a while?" she asked, surprised by how much she wanted him to say yes. "I had not planned on it," Zachary admitted, "but maybe I could delay my return to the cabin. The town could probably use extra hands for repairs." "And I owe you a proper thank you," Jenny added. "Perhaps dinner tonight, my treat." A smile broke across Zachary's face, transforming his usually serious features. I would like that very much. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Jenny helped where she could, despite Mrs. Henderson's scolding about needing more rest. The town came together to repair damage, tend to the wounded, and begin the process of healing. The sense of community was palpable, neighbors helping neighbors, everyone contributing what they could. As evening approached, Jenny returned to the hotel to clean up properly. Mrs. Henderson had kindly offered the use of her personal bathing room behind the hotel kitchen, and Jenny luxuriated in the hot water, washing away days of trail dust and the residue of fear and exhaustion. Her muscles protested the movement, but the heat helped ease some of the stiffness. She had packed a single good dress in her saddlebags, kept for those rare occasions when she needed to look presentable in town. It was a simple garment of deep blue cotton with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs, but it was clean and well made. She braided her hair properly this time, pinning it up in a style more befitting a dinner companion than a trail-worn messenger. When she came downstairs, she found Zachary waiting in the lobby. He had also cleaned up, his long hair tied back, his beard neatly trimmed. He wore a clean shirt and proper trousers instead of his usual buckskins, and the transformation was striking. He looked every bit the gentleman, though the aura of quiet strength still surrounded him. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Jenny's cheeks warm. "You clean up well yourself," she replied, offering a smile. They walked together to the small restaurant attached to the saloon, one of the few places in Victor that served proper sit-down meals. The proprietor, recognizing them as the heroes of the day, insisted on giving them his best table and refused to let them pay. Over plates of roasted venison, fresh bread, and vegetables from local gardens, they talked. Really talked, in a way Jenny had not done with anyone in years. Zachary told her about his life before the war, growing up on a farm in Ohio, the younger of two sons. His brother had died at Gettysburg, and the loss had haunted him. "That is part of why I needed the mountains," he explained. "In the silence, I can sometimes hear my brother's laughter again. In the city, all I heard were the screams." Jenny shared her own story, about growing up with her father after her mother died in childbirth, about learning the wilderness skills that had become her livelihood, about the loneliness of a life spent always moving, never settling. "Do you ever want something different?" Zachary asked. "A more settled life?" "Sometimes," Jenny admitted, "but I have never known what that would look like. Messengering is all I know. It is who I am." "People can be more than one thing," Zachary said thoughtfully. "I was a soldier. Now I am a mountain man, but maybe I could be something else too if I found a reason to change." The weight of his gaze made Jenny's heart race. She understood what he was really saying, the question hidden in his words. Could they be something to each other? Could two solitary souls find common ground? "Maybe we both could," she said softly. They lingered over the meal, reluctant to let the evening end. When they finally left the restaurant, the sun had set, and the street was lit by lanterns hung from posts along the boardwalk. Zachary walked Jenny back to the hotel, and they stood outside the entrance, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "I would like to see you again," Zachary said. "If you are willing." "I am willing," Jenny replied. "Very willing, but I do not know when I will be back in Victor. My work takes me all over the territory." "Then maybe I need to spend more time in town," Zachary suggested. "Or maybe you need a guide for some of your longer routes. I know these mountains better than anyone." Jenny considered the idea. She had always worked alone, but the thought of having Zachary as a partner was appealing in ways she was only beginning to understand. "That could work," she said. "Though I should warn you, I am not easy to keep up with." Zachary laughed, a deep, warm sound that made something flutter in Jenny's chest. "I carried you 6 miles yesterday. I think I can manage." Jenny laughed too, and the ease of it surprised her. When was the last time she had laughed like this, freely and without reservation? She could not remember. "Give me 3 days to finish healing," she said. "Then I have a delivery run to Pine Creek. If you want to come along, we can see how we work together." "I will be here," Zachary promised. He took her hand, his large, calloused palm warm against hers. For a moment, Jenny thought he might kiss her, and her breath caught at the prospect. But instead, he lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Sleep well, Jenny Bryant," he said. "You too, Zachary Kane," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She watched him walk away into the night before finally heading inside and up to her room. Sleep came easily, and for the first time in years, her dreams were not of endless trails and solitary campfires, but of strong arms and dark eyes and the possibility of something more. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Jenny continued to recover, taking progressively longer walks around town to rebuild her stamina. Zachary remained in Victor as well, helping with various tasks around town, and Jenny suspected, finding excuses to cross paths with her. They shared meals together, took walks along the river, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Jenny learned that Zachary was an excellent tracker, that he could read weather patterns with uncanny accuracy, and that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard in the best way. He learned that she could shoot nearly as well as he could, that she had memorized the trails of half the territory, and that she had a stubborn streak a mile wide. On the morning of the 4th day, Jenny woke feeling restored. Her muscles had healed, her energy had returned, and she was ready to get back to work. She found Zachary at the livery stable where he was checking over his horse, a sturdy black gelding named Shadow. "Ready?" he asked when he saw her. "Ready," she confirmed. Her own horse, a tough little bay mare named Copper, was already saddled and loaded with supplies for the journey. They rode out of Victor, heading east toward Pine Creek, a mining settlement about 20 miles away. Jenny carried a small pouch of legal documents that needed to be delivered to the mining company's office. It was routine work, but the payment was good, and the trail offered a chance to test how well she and Zachary could work together. The day was clear and beautiful, the late summer sun warm but not oppressive. They rode side by side when the trail allowed, falling into an easy rhythm. Zachary proved to be an excellent traveling companion, attentive to their surroundings without being overbearing, and comfortable with both conversation and comfortable silence. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat a cold lunch by a stream. Jenny sat on a sun-warmed boulder, dangling her feet over the water, and Zachary settled beside her. "This is nice," he said, watching the water flow past. "I had forgotten how good it feels to share the trail with someone." "I had forgotten too," Jenny admitted, "or maybe I never really knew. I have always worked alone." "Do you like it?" Zachary asked. "Working with me, I mean." Jenny turned to look at him, meeting his earnest gaze. "Yes," she said simply, "I like it very much." Something passed between them then, a moment of understanding and connection that needed no words. Zachary reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Jenny leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed when his lips met hers. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked. Jenny answered by wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something more intense, more passionate. She could feel the controlled strength in his body, the way he held her as though she were something precious and fragile, even though he knew she was neither. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you," he confessed. "Even when I was half dead and covered in trail dust," Jenny teased. "Even then," he confirmed. "There was something about you, about your determination and strength. I knew you were special." "I felt it too," Jenny admitted. "When you picked me up and I knew I was safe. I have never felt that way before." They sat together for a while longer, hands intertwined, watching the stream and simply being together. Eventually, practical considerations forced them back on the trail. They had to reach Pine Creek before dark, and dawdling by a stream, however pleasant, would not get them there. The afternoon passed uneventfully, and they reached Pine Creek just as the sun was setting. The mining town was rougher than Victor, a collection of hastily constructed buildings serving a transient population of prospectors and miners. Jenny delivered her documents to the mining office, collected her payment, and then she and Zachary found lodging at a boarding house on the edge of town. The proprietor, a suspicious old woman with sharp eyes, looked them over critically. "2 rooms or one?" she asked bluntly. Jenny felt her face heat, but before she could stammer out a reply, Zachary said calmly, "2 rooms, please. Adjoining if you have them." The old woman snorted but handed over 2 keys. "Supper is served at 6. Do not be late or you go hungry." The rooms were small and plain, but they were clean, and the beds looked comfortable. Jenny was unpacking her saddlebags when she heard a soft knock on the connecting door between the rooms. She opened it to find Zachary leaning against the doorframe, a slight smile on his face. "Just checking to make sure everything is acceptable," he said. "It is fine," Jenny assured him. "Better than sleeping on the ground, which is what I usually do." "You sleep on the ground?" Zachary looked surprised. "Even when you are near towns. Hotels cost money," Jenny explained. "I save my earnings. Someday I want to buy a small piece of land, maybe build a cabin, have a place that is mine." Zachary's expression grew thoughtful. "Where would you want this land to be?" "Somewhere in the mountains," Jenny said without hesitation. "Maybe near Victor. I like that area. Good people, beautiful country." "There is unclaimed land in the hills north of my cabin," Zachary said carefully. "Beautiful meadow with a stream running through it. I have thought about claiming it myself but never got around to it." Jenny met his eyes, understanding the implications. "Maybe you should claim it," she said softly, "before someone else does." "Maybe we should claim it," Zachary countered. The suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Jenny's heart raced. They had known each other less than a week. By any rational measure, this was too fast, too soon. But standing there looking at Zachary, feeling the connection between them, Jenny could not bring herself to care about rational measures. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" she said. "I am saying that I want a future with you," Zachary replied, stepping into her room and taking her hands in his. "I know it is fast. I know we have only just met, but I also know that I have never felt this way before. You are strong and brave and beautiful and everything I did not know I was looking for. If you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Jenny felt tears prick at her eyes. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want it so much it scares me." "Then say yes," Zachary urged. "Say you will marry me and we will build a life together. You can keep working as a messenger if that is what you want, and I will come with you. Or we can do something else entirely. As long as we are together, I do not care what we do." "Yes," Jenny said, the word coming out part laugh, part sob. "Yes, I will marry you." Zachary lifted her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this kiss held promises of forever. They went downstairs for supper in a daze of happiness, barely tasting the food, too caught up in making plans for their future. They decided to return to Victor as soon as Jenny's business in Pine Creek was finished, and to speak with the pastor about arranging a wedding. They would claim that land north of Zachary's cabin and build a home together. Jenny would continue her messenger work, at least for a while, and Zachary would accompany her when possible and tend their property when she needed to make runs alone. That night, Jenny lay in her narrow bed in the boarding house, staring at the ceiling, too excited to sleep. Through the thin wall, she could hear Zachary moving around in his room, and she smiled, knowing he was likely just as sleepless. In less than a week, her entire life had changed. She had gone from solitary messenger with no real ties to engaged woman with a future stretching bright before her. The next morning, they set out for Victor with the sunrise. The return journey felt different, lighter somehow. They talked about everything. What kind of cabin they wanted to build, whether to get chickens, how many horses they would need, what they would name their first child when the time came. The future that had always seemed nebulous to Jenny now had shape and form and detail. They reached Victor late in the afternoon, and their first stop was the church. Pastor Williams, a kind elderly man who had been serving the community for over a decade, listened to their request with a bemused smile. "You young people certainly do move fast these days," he said. "But I have known Zachary for a few years now, and I heard about your heroism, Miss Bryant. If you are both certain about this, I see no reason to delay. How does Saturday sound?" "Saturday is perfect," Jenny agreed, squeezing Zachary's hand. Word spread quickly through the small town, and within hours, it seemed everyone in Victor knew about the upcoming wedding. Mrs. Henderson insisted on making Jenny's wedding dress, though Jenny protested that her good blue dress would be fine. The trading post owner offered a generous discount on supplies for setting up their new household. The sheriff's wife volunteered to bake a cake. Jenny was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support and generosity. She had spent so much of her life moving from place to place, never putting down roots, never being part of a community. Now, for the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Zachary rode out to the meadow north of his cabin and officially filed a claim on the land at the territorial office. He and a group of men from town started felling trees for the cabin, working from dawn to dusk to get the basic structure up before winter. Jenny helped where she could while also dealing with the influx of messenger requests that had piled up during her absence. On Friday evening, the night before the wedding, Jenny sat with Mrs. Henderson in the hotel parlor, trying on the dress the older woman had worked tirelessly to complete. It was beautiful, made of cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the bodice and sleeves. Mrs. Henderson had even fashioned a small veil from lace salvaged from an old tablecloth. "You look like an angel," Mrs. Henderson said, tears in her eyes. "Zachary Kane is a lucky man." "I think I am the lucky one," Jenny replied. She had told Mrs. Henderson some of her story about her solitary life and the unexpected miracle of finding Zachary. "I never thought I would have this. I had convinced myself I did not need it. But now I cannot imagine going back to how things were before." "That is how you know it is real love," Mrs. Henderson said wisely. "When the thought of life without that person becomes unbearable." That night Jenny barely slept, her mind racing with anticipation and joy and a hint of nervousness. What if she was not good at being married? What if her independent nature clashed with partnership? What if she disappointed Zachary? But when Saturday morning arrived, bright and clear, all her doubts evaporated. She dressed carefully in her wedding gown, and Mrs. Henderson helped arrange her hair and fix the veil. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, truly, deeply happy. The wedding was held in the small church at 10 in the morning. It seemed like the entire town had turned out for the occasion. Jenny walked down the aisle alone, as she had no family to give her away, but she did not feel alone. The community she had become part of surrounded her with warmth and well wishes. And at the end of the aisle stood Zachary, looking handsome in a new shirt and vest, his long hair neatly tied back, his eyes shining with love and promise. When she reached him and took his hands, Jenny felt complete in a way she never had before. Pastor Williams conducted the ceremony with warmth and humor, speaking about the bonds of marriage and the strength that comes from partnership. When the time came for vows, Zachary spoke first, his deep voice steady and sure. "Jenny Bryant, I vow to stand beside you through whatever comes. I will protect you when you need protection, support you when you need support, and step back when you need to stand on your own. I will love you with everything I am, for as long as I live." Jenny's voice was thick with emotion when she replied, "Zachary Kane, I vow to share my life with you completely. I will trust you with my heart, my dreams, and my fears. I will be your partner in all things, your companion on whatever trail we choose to walk. I will love you fiercely and forever." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, and Zachary kissed her, the small church erupted in applause and cheers. Jenny laughed against Zachary's lips, overwhelmed by the joy of the moment. The celebration continued outside, where tables had been set up with food contributed by various townspeople. There was music and dancing and toasts to the happy couple. Jenny danced with Zachary, his strong arms guiding her with surprising grace, and she felt like she was floating. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Zachary leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Kane?" "More than ready," Jenny whispered back. They said their goodbyes and thank yous, collected the various gifts and well wishes pressed upon them, and rode out of town toward their new property. Zachary had spent the previous evening making his cabin comfortable for their first night as a married couple. And though their permanent home was still under construction, the cabin would serve them well in the meantime. The cabin was small but well built, nestled in a grove of pines with a clear view of the valley below. Zachary had placed wildflowers in a jar on the table and built up the fire so the single room was warm and welcoming. He lifted Jenny across the threshold, making her laugh, and then slowly set her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "I love you, Jenny Kane," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you too, Zachary Kane," she replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. What followed was a night of tenderness and passion, of discovering each other fully for the first time. Zachary was patient and attentive, ensuring Jenny's comfort and pleasure, and she marveled at how natural it felt to be with him this way. They fell asleep tangled together, the fire crackling softly, the mountain silence peaceful around them. The next morning, Jenny woke to find Zachary already up, making breakfast over the fire. She watched him for a moment, this strong, capable man who was now her husband, and felt a surge of contentment so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "Good morning, wife," Zachary said, noticing she was awake. "Good morning, husband," Jenny replied, loving how the words sounded. They spent the day exploring their property, walking the boundaries, discussing where exactly to build the new cabin and where to put a garden and a stable. It was hard work made easy by being together, by the shared vision of what they were building. Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. The cabin construction progressed steadily with help from men in town who owed Zachary favors or simply wanted to help. Jenny took on messenger work, and true to his word, Zachary accompanied her when he could and managed their property when she needed to ride alone. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, supporting each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. By October, the new cabin was finished. It was larger than Zachary's old place, with 2 rooms and a loft, a stone fireplace, and real glass windows. They moved in on a crisp autumn day, carrying their meager possessions and a growing collection of household items gifted by the community. That first night in their new home, they lay in the bed Zachary had built with his own hands and talked late into the night about their dreams for the future. Jenny traced patterns on Zachary's chest, her head resting over his heart. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Zachary asked, running his fingers through her unbound hair. "For catching me when I fell," Jenny said. "For carrying me home. For showing me that I do not have to do everything alone." "You never have to thank me for that," Zachary replied. "You are my home now, Jenny. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Winter came to the Wyoming mountains with fury and beauty. Snow blanketed the high country and the temperatures plunged. But inside their cabin, Jenny and Zachary were warm and content. They spent the long winter evenings by the fire, reading, talking, planning for the spring. Jenny taught Zachary to read better, as his education had been interrupted by the war. Zachary taught Jenny advanced tracking skills and how to read animal signs in the snow. It was in late February that Jenny realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before telling Zachary. When she finally shared the news, his face lit up with such pure joy that she found herself crying happy tears. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly, placing his large hand gently on her still flat belly. "A little person made from both of us." "Are you ready to be a father?" Jenny asked, though she already knew the answer. "I have been ready since the day I met you," Zachary replied. "Everything good in my life started when I found you on that trail." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Jenny continued her messenger work into her 6th month, with Zachary hovering protectively but trying not to interfere with her independence. Eventually, though, travel became too uncomfortable, and she reluctantly agreed to stop taking long-distance runs. She turned her attention to preparing for the baby, making tiny clothes, setting up a cradle Zachary had carved with painstaking care. The women of Victor rallied around her, offering advice and support. Mrs. Henderson became a surrogate mother figure, sharing wisdom about childbirth and child-rearing that Jenny's own mother had never lived to provide. In September of 1877, just over a year after Jenny had run herself to collapse with that fateful message, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy in their mountain cabin. Zachary held her hand through the difficult labor, his strong presence anchoring her through the pain. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and pink and perfect, Zachary wept openly. They named him William Zachary Kane, after Jenny's father and his own father. Little William had his mother's brown hair and his father's dark eyes, and from the beginning, he was a strong, determined child. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, surprising Jenny with his tenderness toward such a tiny creature. He would walk the floor with William for hours when the baby was fussy, singing old songs in his deep voice until the infant settled. Life fell into a new rhythm, shaped around the needs of their growing family. Jenny stayed closer to home during William's first year, taking only short messenger runs to settlements within a few hours' ride. She had saved enough money that they could afford for her to work less, and she found she did not mind. Being with her family brought her a different kind of satisfaction than her work had. When William was 2 years old, Jenny became pregnant again. This time she felt more confident, more prepared for what was coming. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1880, a tiny but fierce little girl with Zachary's dark coloring and Jenny's determined spirit. They named her Sarah Marie after Zachary's mother. The cabin that had seemed so spacious when it was just the two of them now felt cozy and full of life. William was an energetic toddler, always exploring, always asking questions. Sarah was a colicky baby who demanded constant attention. Yet somehow, in the midst of the chaos, Jenny and Zachary's bond only grew stronger. They worked as a team, supporting each other through sleepless nights and challenging days. Zachary took on more guide work and hunting to support their growing family, while Jenny managed the household and took occasional messenger jobs when Zachary was home to watch the children. Mrs. Henderson often came to visit, delighting in the role of honorary grandmother. Years passed in a blur of happy chaos. William grew into a bright, adventurous boy who loved exploring the mountains with his father. Sarah proved to be stubborn and fearless, traits that Jenny recognized from herself. When William was 6 and Sarah 4, Jenny gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Emma. The cabin had to be expanded again, and Zachary built an addition with help from friends in Victor. Their property had grown too, with a large garden, a chicken coop, a stable for their growing number of horses, and a small barn. What had started as raw wilderness was now a thriving homestead. Jenny sometimes thought back to that day in August 1876, when she had run until she collapsed, certain she would die on that mountain trail. She thought about how Zachary had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known to voice, how he had carried her to safety, and in doing so, had carried her into a life she never could have imagined for herself. Her work as a messenger had given her independence and purpose, but it was Zachary and their children who had given her belonging. She no longer spent her days alone on endless trails. Instead, she was surrounded by love and laughter, by family and community, by a life rich with meaning. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Jenny back to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson and rode up the mountain trail to the place where Jenny had collapsed in exhaustion and desperation. "I think about this day often," Zachary said as they stood looking at the familiar rocks and trees. "What if I had left for town an hour later? What if I had taken a different trail? We might never have met." "But you did not leave later and you took this exact trail," Jenny replied, taking his hand. "Maybe it was fate, maybe it was God, maybe it was just extraordinary luck. Whatever it was, I am grateful every single day." "I love you, Jenny Kane," Zachary said, pulling her into his arms. "More now than I did 10 years ago, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Jenny whispered. "Thank you for catching me when I fell." "Always," Zachary promised. "For the rest of my life I will always catch you." They rode back to their cabin as the sun set, painting the mountain peaks in gold and crimson. When they arrived, they found their children playing in the yard under Mrs. Henderson's watchful eye. William was teaching Sarah and the twins to track animals in the dirt, his young voice serious as he shared what his father had taught him. Jenny and Zachary stood for a moment, just watching their family, their home, their life. It was a good life, built on love and trust and partnership. It was everything Jenny had never known she wanted, and everything she now could not live without. As the years continued to pass, their children grew and eventually started families of their own. William became a guide like his father, leading hunting parties and explorers through the mountain wilderness. Sarah married a doctor who set up practice in Victor, and they gave Jenny and Zachary their first grandchildren. The twins both became teachers, traveling to small settlements throughout the territory to educate frontier children. Jenny and Zachary grew old together in the cabin they had built, watching the territory grow and change around them. Wyoming became a state in 1890. and they attended the celebration in Victor, now a much larger and more prosperous town than the small settlement where they had first met. Through it all, their love remained constant. They were partners in the truest sense, each supporting and strengthening the other. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch Zachary had added to the cabin, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains, comfortable in the silence that comes from knowing someone completely. Jenny never forgot her days as a messenger, the freedom and purpose that work had given her. But she also knew that her greatest journey had not been across the wild Wyoming landscape, but from independence to partnership, from solitude to family, from falling to being caught and carried home. And when, in their later years, people would ask Jenny about her life, about how she and Zachary had built such a strong marriage and raised such wonderful children, she would smile and tell them the story of the day she ran until she collapsed, and a mountain man caught her and carried her the rest of the way home. But he had not just carried her body, she would explain. He had carried her heart, her hopes, her dreams, and her future. And in return, she had given him hers. It was a fair trade, the best trade either of them had ever made. And it all started with a desperate run, a collapse, a rescue, and the beginning of forever.